My name is Eddie Lai. I'm one of the co-founders of the Association of Asian Healthcare Leaders here, AAHL, and we're very excited to have this webinar today called Writing Your Story, Women in Healthcare. And we have lovely Jennifer Ho moderating. So before I give it to her, I'm just going to give some quick announcements and follow up from our last webinar that we had in July. Oh, let me see if this works. Oh, all right, advancing this slide. So once again, this is an event that's it's our first partnered event, and we are the Association of Asian Healthcare Leaders, or AAHL. Just some key highlights from the last time we spoke, which was last month, is that we hosted our Administrative Fellowships webinar. We had a great turnout. Launched our LinkedIn group, which we'll talk about later as well. We also raised funds for the Loveland Foundation. We raised $180 for the organization, so extremely happy to be able to do that based on all the people who registered and attended. Our group on LinkedIn has 250 plus members, and we're excited to continue to grow our community. You can join using that link over there in the corner, and I will go ahead later and text it to the entire group chat as well. And with that, I will hand it off to our moderator, Jen Ho.
Thank you, Eddie. My name is Jennifer Ho, and before we begin, thank you so much to the American College of Healthcare Executives Southeast Texas chapter for being our partner for this event, specifically Mark Biscone, who's on the line right now, for just helping us with everything. And we really want to encourage everyone in this region of the U.S. to check out the ACHE Southeast Texas chapter website to find out more about joining as a member and to register for our third quarter chapter meeting and webinar. And while we're on the subject of ACHE, actually, there is also an Asian Healthcare Leaders Forum that you can join with future events coming up. I know Bonnie is very active in this as well. And if you check out the website for this forum, you'll actually find two of our speakers there that's noted on the page. All right, and next slide. And now to start things off, I want to give a warm welcome to our lovely panelists, Bonnie Panlasigui, I hope I said that right, Bonnie, Coleen, Sentara, and Malisha, Patel. And I first just wanted to point out how incredibly accomplished these ladies are by sharing a few highlights that they might not share in their self-introductions. Bonnie was given the Up and Comers Award by Modern Healthcare in 2016 and has been very active with ACHE, earning the Senior Executives Regents Award. Coleen also earned the Modern Healthcare's Up and Comers Award in 2018. And in 2019, she was honored with the distinction of being one woman in business by Inside Business. Malisha was one of Houston Business Journal's 2019 40 Under 40 honorees and is a part of the board of directors of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce in Houston. And they have made significant impact in both Houston and India. And now this is just a reminder that we all start somewhere, and we're here today to learn about how Bonnie, Coleen, and Malisha started in healthcare. And although we may not have control about what happens in our life, we can control what we do with our story. We're all shaped by our own stories, and if you're struggling to articulate your story, all you have to do is start. Don't aim to get it perfect, get it going. So with that being said, let's begin by having our speakers give a brief introduction about their cultural background and current leadership position, and then we'll jump right into the questions. Let's start with you, Bonnie, followed by Coleen, and then Malisha.
Okay. First, I want to say thank you, Jennifer and Andrew and Eddie, for really putting this together. I just really put my hats off to you guys, because you are the future of our healthcare industry, and the initiative that you're taking right now as students or even as recent graduates and residents, I'm just really impressed how you reached out and you are you're go-getters. You guys are great, and thank you everybody for the audience for being here as well. I've been here at St. Mary Medical Center here in Long Beach, California, going on 2 years now. And been in the healthcare industry for over 10 years, but you know, really enjoy my time. And here at this hospital, Carolyn Caldwell is in the audience, and she's a very well-known CEO in our industry. And it's you know, I'm just going to say this as a sidebar because this conversation is around women in healthcare. It's really nice to be able to work for a female CEO that I have a lot of respect for. And so I'm a mother of a 3-year-old. And so in the conversation, if you want to ask questions about work-life balance and the whole motherhood thing, I'd be happy to answer questions on that as well.
Great, thank you. And Coleen?
So I want to echo what Bonnie said, and you guys are go-getters. It's impressive to see, and so thank you guys for organizing. Just a little bit background that might be interesting to you guys. I'm actually from an immigrant family that came here from the Philippines, and so my mother was a nurse, dad was in the Navy, so some of your traditional kind of nurse-Navy combination coming into the US. I got here early when I was 1. So I did grow up here in Virginia, K through 12. I started when I was a volunteer at 15 years old and then worked my way up. And so did secretarial work. And one of the turning points that I want to mention, and also one of the ways I met Bonnie, because we go way back, I'm scared to say 20 years now, Bonnie.
Was it 2005, 2006? Oh my gosh, it's been a long time.
Through the Institute for Diversity that you guys are working with through AHA as well. And so entering that program, I think, opened lots of doors for me that I don't think might not have been opened before. So I can talk from that perspective as well, because I worked really hard through various roles, but I think that was really a good breaking point for me. And then from there, just worked the way up the career ladder. Bonnie and I have similar backgrounds, going through the for-profit world first and then crossing back into not-for-profit. So that's just a little bit background for now. So, in the current role, so I'm currently a president of one of our Sentara hospitals. It's my second Sentara hospital in the president role, so I'm really excited to be part of the Western Tidewater and Suffolk community nowadays.
Awesome. And Malisha?
All right, well, good evening to everybody. I want to start off and echo Bonnie and Coleen as well. Kudos to the team for organizing this event. Just a little bit about me. I'm the CEO and Senior Vice President for Memorial Hermann Sugar Land and Memorial Hermann Southwest Hospital, which are 2 community hospitals in the greater Houston area, one in Fort Bend County and one in Harris County. I've been with Memorial Hermann for over 12 years in various roles. I would say probably one of the most exciting accomplishments that I've had with the team there is receiving the Baldridge designation at the Sugarland facility a few years ago. Prior to Memorial Hermann, I worked at Tenet Healthcare Corporation, and prior to that, I worked at the VA of North Texas, and that's where I did my administrative residency. I did my graduate work at Trinity, and I'm a Longhorn. That's where I did my undergraduate. A little bit about me, similar to Coleen. I did volunteer when I was 14, 15, 16 in the hospital. Always knew I wanted to be in healthcare. I'm really passionate about the mission-driven work. The one I'm most passionate about is my family. I also have 2 kids. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, 2 little boys.
Great, thank you so much for the speaker introductions, and I'm really excited to learn more about your journey as well. So let's go ahead and get through to the moderator-led questions, and hopefully we'll have a lot of time left for the audience Q&A. So the first question, the path to become a C-suite executive is often daunting because it feels unobtainable. Growing up, did you dream of becoming an executive one day, and what inspired you throughout your many years of healthcare experience? We'll start with you, Malisha.
Okay, so I think growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor, but I'll tell you, it's not really clear parents' dream or my dream. But over the years, I realized that, being a physician was not the right thing for me. I majored in biology at UT, and I had several life experiences and a really random opportunity where I got to hear about the healthcare administration program at a seminar in the business school. And I said, wow, I think this is, I love the idea of helping people making an impact at a different level. And so that's what really influenced me, is is I love the impact that you can make in this type of role. I'll honestly tell you, I didn't think going in, I want to be a CEO. I wanted to be at a point where I'm making positive change. And the journey here has allowed me to do that.
Great. And what about you, Coleen or Bonnie?
Go ahead.
Okay. The answer to the question, like, did I grow up wanting to be a CEO? I'd say yes. And there was a journey going through that. So my mom's an oncology nurse, so I was exposed really early on. And with nursing, they bring you to the hospital and they show you around all their friends, all their nursing friends, because everyone's one big family. And so lots of trips to the hospital. And I just said, gosh, I just like something about this situation. It's its own community within a building. And so I thought I wanted to be a nurse at first. And so I started following them around, and I literally couldn't stomach it. So I figured I need to opt out of this. I couldn't do the blood and the sputum or any of that stuff. And so I went through this journey of following around as many people as I could in the hospital. And I grew up, my mom telling me I was bossy. So I said, hey, maybe we'll give health administration a try. But, all kidding aside, when you think about the influence and impact that you can make, not only within the building, but in the broader community, because I'd always been really active in school, wanting to get involved like SGA and things like that, and said, gosh, I wonder what it'd be like to be CEO of a hospital one day. But when you looked around, you didn't see a lot of female administrators, let alone female administrators of color. And so it was during one of my internships, I ran into a Black female administrator who took me under her wing, and I said, gosh darn it, I think I can do this. And so I took the path that I looked around that all of the older Caucasian male took, and I said, I'm taking that path through school, and I'm going to figure it out too. So I did have an early inkling of getting into health administration. So I started that through the internships and then also through undergrad. So I have had my eyes set on this role for a long time.
Great. And we'll definitely talk about your experiences with a sponsor too. I know someone just asked that question, but what about you, Bonnie?
Sure. Yeah, I think like many of us in healthcare administration, a lot of us probably started off thinking we wanted to be pre-med, but I just couldn't handle the organic chemistry. After that class, I said, I'm not putting myself through that misery. And it's interesting, I had an internship at a hospital, and I was walking by administration. I was actually doing an internship in the lab at the time. And I walked into the administrative suite and spoke with the assistant right there in the front. And I said, what do you guys do here in administration? And I was 19 years old, sophomore in undergrad, and the COO happened to come out, and he heard the question, and he said, well, if you're really interested, you're welcome to shadow some of the departments here, and spend some time getting to know what we do here in administration. And after that summer, I was really sold, and seeing how he knew the employees in the hallways on a first name basis, stopping in the hallways to talk to the physicians and write notes and follow up with them, being sincere enough to write handwritten thank you cards. I saw that COO and I said, there's a whole world behind the scenes of the hospital that really intrigued me, and I saw the leadership that he had. And so I told myself at that age of 19 that I really wanted to go into administration for that reason and be a COO and a CEO.
Right. So I see this trend that each of you are starting young. So it's nice that there are a lot of undergraduate students that are in this webinar too. So this, I think, would really give them that inspiration. So with the second question, what challenges have you faced as a woman in healthcare, and how were you able to overcome them? Why don't you start us off, Coleen?
Such a loaded question. Whole hour about that. Well, I jotted a couple things down. So the question around being, what challenges you face as a woman in healthcare. Sometimes it's about being heard in a room full of men. I mean, that's one challenge. I'm being brave, and I'm being honest today. So getting respect quickly, because you get judged by your cover. And sometimes, I'm going to say it out loud, sometimes Asian Americans, we look a little bit younger than our age. And so they're looking at you like you're a female, you look like you're 16, what are you doing here? And you're trying to get taken seriously. So sometimes that was hard. So then therefore figuring out how to get executive presence early with emphasis, you know, and leaving a lasting mark and gaining that respect as quick as you can. And then sometimes connecting with your male counterparts, because that matters when you're in a room and you're the minority in the room. So I think those are some early kind of high level topics for women in healthcare. How about you ladies?
Yeah. How about you, Bonnie?
Sure, I'll go next. You know, there's a saying that is one of my favorites, and it's that champions don't become champions in the ring. They're merely recognized there. And there's a lot of setbacks that happen to everybody in their careers and every story that they have to share. And it's just, you know, how do you have that resiliency to bounce back when you do have that setback? I think that's really important for all of us in any field. But, you know, in specific to being a female and some of the challenges, I think with every decade of our career, we experience different things. And so I'll tell you about my first decade, you know, being young, like what Coleen was saying, you know, needing to be perceived as, you know, being taken serious. So I remember being an associate administrator in a training role to be a COO, and the COO told me, you know, Bonnie, you've got to stop with the pink nail polish. You can't have bling bling on your phone. You know, it's just those types of things. Or I actually heard when I was rounding and I was new to the organization, and a nurse, I overheard her say, well, what is she going to do? Just stand there and look pretty. And it was really hurtful to hear that. But at the same time, I told myself, I'm going to make it a point that that nurse knows that I'm here for business, and that we are here in administration to listen to their feedback and to make improvements in the organization. And so, you know, it's things like that that you may hear. And I got told before, you know, you're too much of an independent thinker. And, you know, there's going to be times where you hear things where people may try to say, you don't fit the mold of, you know, what you think you want to be in the future. And so just, you know, having that resiliency. And then I think in the second decade of my career now that I'm starting is really getting hit hard with what does work-life balance really mean, being a mother, and, you know, realizing that you have to be there not only for your spouse, but also for your child. And so I think, you know, being a mother changes everything, your whole perspective on things. I used to be more geographically flexible, for example, living in all kinds of states. And now I have a little bit of a different perception on that. So it's just interesting, you know, how the challenges change over time.
Can I just point something out that she said that was really important, I think, for the audience to hear, and I echo, is she said the word resilience, because I didn't answer the second part of the question, is how do you overcome some of these challenges that head our way? You cannot come into health administration unless you are ready to be resilient. You have to be able to bounce back. I think that's probably, you know, top three. So thanks for pointing that out, Bonnie.
That's some really good advice. And what about you, Malisha?
Okay, I feel like I have a lot of similarities with what Coleen and Bonnie have shared with you. You know, many times, and probably over the past 15 years, there's been many times where I've been the only female in the room or the only minority in the room. And so it does feel uncomfortable. And then it's just about getting used to it and getting your voice heard. And I know maybe some of you guys have heard of imposter syndrome, but there's definitely been moments in my career where I felt like, do I belong here? Because you don't look like everyone else. And, you know, we constantly question ourselves, are we saying the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? And there's many times I've had to pinch myself, say, yes, I belong here. I've worked this hard to be here. And, you know, I could definitely have an impact in the work that I'm doing. The work shows for it. And I think what Bonnie shared has also been really important is work-life balance. It's challenging for all women. And, 8 years ago when I had my first son, I mean, I was thinking, when to go back to work? Should I take my 12 weeks? What are people going to think? And I'll tell all women, take 12 weeks, take as long as you can, because you can't get that time back and that work will be there. And coming back and asking for things that are important to you, it's just maybe too personal, but for me, nursing was important. And so how was I going to make it work around my schedule and meetings, and still being present for the work that I need to do? You just prioritize differently as a woman. You may not go to those happy hours because you want to get your work done and go home and spend it with your family, and that's okay. The fact I would give to overcome the challenges, the thing I would agree to is I also look young and petite as well. And so there are still days when I walk through the hospital where people, if I'm not wearing my heels, would ask I'm a volunteer. So yeah, I'll tell you, as many Asian Americans say, we've been brought up, many parents teach their kids to be humble. And I think that's one thing that we need to overcome is, we don't talk about our achievements or our accolades, and others around us do. And so getting comfortable and or you don't act, how do you do that? That balance is important. Networking is important. Building those relationships like Bonnie and Coleen said, that the rate could overcome challenges. Mentors look different. They could be male, they could be female, could be informal, they could be formal. Reach out and constantly get feedback. It's important to get feedback to develop and grow. And I think that's definitely helped me along the way. And I agree with Coleen, executive presence. How do you build that? Reach out to other women, ask for feedback as well. Then I also think asking for stretch assignments is another way to overcome, so people could see what you could bring to the table.
Right, and that was a really fully loaded question, and I really like how each of you touched about work-life balance. And a quote that I remember from our local ACHE conference was that as women, we want to have it all, but we can't have it all at the same time. So it's really important to just remember that, and it's a struggle that we constantly have to face as women. And I know, Coleen, you mentioned first that even when it comes to our appearance, Asian Americans are very petite, and that affects how your executive presence can be as well. So with this next question, according to Forbes, Asian Americans are the most educated racial group, but they are least likely to hold senior leadership positions. The term bamboo ceiling was coined to address the barriers that specifically Asian Americans face. What are your thoughts about the bamboo ceiling, and how do you think rising Asian leaders can change this narrative? What do you think, Bonnie?
Yeah, a very wise mentor of mine, she said, you are not defined by what an organization or a person or what the world says about you. And so no matter what anyone says about you, keep going for your goal. And obstacles, I've always felt like, are not dead ends. They're just direction finders. And so in a way, you learn about yourself as you go through your journey of your career, and really what matters, the most to you. And you're asking, how do we change that narrative? And that was part of the question of, what do we do, and what kind of advice can we give to the people that are in the audience here? And I know I said the word resiliency before, and also tenacity to stay the course. We have to break past the stereotypes and just, you know, realize that executive presence is who you are. It's your authenticity. And you don't have to mimic anybody else that you think may have executive presence. Your presence is genuinely just being yourself. And it took me a while to realize that early in my career. I always thought I had to talk a certain way, or I had to, you know, carry myself in a certain way or say certain things. But I just realized over time, I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to have, well, all of us here have long hair now, but for the longest time earlier in my career, I would always chop my hair off thinking, oh, I just have to have short hair to be taken seriously. You know, it's those types of things, and the stereotypes that if you have, you know, long hair, or if it's curly, maybe you're not as serious as you could be if you know, had the short hair. So it's again, you're trying to fit a certain mold, and you really have to be like, you know, the water off a duck's back. And you know, it's funny, I'm just gonna have a little side story here. I'll talk about my daughter here, but you know, she loves to feed the ducks. And so, you know, when we go out to feed the ducks, you know, they're coming out of the water and you can see it, the water just beads right off of their back, and it doesn't even absorb into their feathers. And that's really the true definition of, you know, not letting things get to you, not letting things get under your skin. And then the other thing I would say is do your job. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times people make a mistake of doing the job they want to do. And then they don't do their job well, and they don't get results. So, you know, one of the first hires that I had, he wanted to be a COO, which is great. I totally support that. But he was so consumed of trying to be in other meetings that he thought was important for a COO to be in, that he in turn could not perform and do his job well. I've also heard of COOs doing the same mistake where they don't do their job well because they're too consumed with trying to do what they think a CEO should be doing, and in turn their departments might fall apart. So, you know, that's something that I would say is, you know, as advice is, you know, as you're breaking through any kind of stereotypes, just as you would in any field, just be consistent and get those results.
And what about you, Coleen, then?
You know, just listening to Bonnie and Malisha, we have so much in common through our journey. And so I don't want to be repetitive, but we just have very similar pathways. I too cut my hair really short. I tried to wear a lot of makeup and tried to get like a really nice structured suit, hoping that I would fit in. You know, I was really obsessed with that book, Bamboo Ceiling. It spoke to me. And then what's interesting, from one place to another, I got the feedback that I was meek. And I said, oh, I'm not meek, because I'm like inherently super competitive and extremely assertive, but I was showing up to work really meek because it was like my fallback plan somehow. And so what I wanted to tell you guys, you know, it's okay to, you know, in an Asian household sometimes, so I'm not trying to stereotype because I'll just talk about my own, you're really meant for perfection and you're meant to strive to these, you know, amazing roles. That's a reason why we moved to, you know, the United States, is to get an education and get a really good job. And so there's lots of pressure to be perfect sometimes. But in the space of administration, you have to be willing to fail. You're not here to be specifically like a subject matter expert or the smartest person in the room. And when you learn that, because a lot of times I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I will go find smarter people than me to be on my team, and then we can be the smartest team in the room. But really, it's okay to fail and to try things. And just touching on what these two had talked about previously, I wanted to talk about in this question, being uncomfortable is important and essential to your growth. And so sometimes I think because we're trying to be perfect, or you know, a high achiever sometimes in the Asian household, that we shy away from sometimes failing. And so keeping that mind of being uncomfortable is going to be really crucial, I think, for your career growth. Many a times, even today, I just sit in an uncomfortable setting. But that, I know that's the way that I'm going to continue to keep pushing forward, you know, for myself. And Bonnie talked about, you know, authenticity. And I want to talk about that because it took me too long to figure that out. And I wouldn't say early in the mentorship, because we did come up in a different era, I'm going to admit, early 2000s, a little bit different. I think now people are far more accepting about the differences, right? So a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion, not so much back then. So it was about assimilation. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we mimic other people versus just saying, what are my strengths? What are my good qualities? What am I going to bring to the table? And how do I become my authentic self? Because when you're your authentic self, you're your best self. And then you're far more effective than you mimicking somebody else.
I love these points. And Malisha, why don't you start us off with the next question then, just so we have enough time for audience Q&A. But Asian Americans are well represented as healthcare professionals, such as physicians, nurses, and pharmacists. And Malisha, I do recall that you did want to become pre-med before, but we don't see this reflected in healthcare administration. Why do you think Asian Americans don't pursue a career in healthcare administration, and how can we develop the next generation?
I think it's twofold. I think one, it's awareness. How do we, go to different colleges and their communities, healthcare administration, and then events such as this brings awareness to undergrads and to different folks that are interested in moving in the health career administration path. We're only a small percentage of healthcare administrators in the country and around the world. So we have a gap to fill, and we need more folks to get in the position, more of us to talk about it and encourage other women of different backgrounds to explore and learn about healthcare administration. And so I think it's on us to continue events like this and talk about all the great things that you could do and the impact that you could make. I'll tell you, I don't know if I'm aware of healthcare administration if I didn't see a random flyer in the business school. And so what could we do to continue to bring awareness to this field? I'll have the last question really quick because I 100% agree with Coleen and Bonnie about being you and the authenticity. But I also share that I also, I don't wear glasses. I just got reading glasses like 3 months ago. But when I started, I was optometrist and I got glasses just to get glasses to look older. So I didn't cut my hair, but I did get glasses initially. So I completely understand the whole cutting your hair to see if you could assimilate. But I think right on about being you and about comfortable because that allows you to grow as a leader and as an individual.
Right. And what about you, Bonnie?
When I heard the question, I was thinking too around that we do have there are a lot of Asians that are physicians and nurses. I'm not Filipino, but a lot of people think I am. My mom's Korean, and my dad's white. So when I walk and round and talk to the staff, one of the best compliments I've ever received in my entire career that I look back on, there's a handful of things that you hear that you really like and you want to keep with you. And it was a nurse, and she said, Bonnie, you don't look like an executive. And you think that would be an insult, right? But then she said, because you look like us. And, that really stuck with me, and that really made me feel warm inside because, she said, you can understand us and where we come from. And that really felt good to see that connection, just because simply we look like them. And that's really powerful, I think. And it's important when you hear the words diversity and making sure that as leadership, we reflect the community served. Not only does that mean a lot to that nurse, but patients and our community members that see diversity in leadership, that means a lot to them as well. And so I think, you know, we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, these are excellent points. And I know someone asked about this question earlier about mentors and sponsors. So before we head off officially to the audience Q&A, this is similar to their question, but I'm sure you've had many mentors and sponsors that helped you throughout your career. What is your advice to those who are struggling to find a mentor or even maintain a mentoring relationship with someone twice their age? Coleen, can you start us off?
Yeah, so one of the things that sometimes you're just shooting for the stars and you might be enamored by like a title that somebody has, and if you're assertive enough, you might email the heck out of, you know, a whole bunch of people on ACHE, right? Or from your alumni association. But what it really comes down to that I discovered at the end is that somebody really cares about you. And they don't have to have a big title, because they're willing to spend the time, they're willing to be reflective, they're willing to share pieces of their journey, even if they're not the CEO of some like $20 billion company. It was a really meaningful relationship. The people that said, I see something into you, you know, in you, and I see that you have potential. Let's talk about that. And they didn't have to have a huge title, like I said. And so don't, you know, just shoot for people like with big titles. And think about people that are of your likeness and also people that are very different from you, because you can learn from someone that's completely different from you and learn a totally different perspective. And that will kind of grow your thinking and grow the breadth and the depth of places that you might not have gone to on your own. So that's my 2 cents about finding like a mentor and a sponsor. Sponsor is kind of a newer word, I would say. I wouldn't say that was something like early on that we had. But I think sponsor now is really key, meaning somebody that really will pull you up through the ranks, like physically in your organization. And so again, when you're looking for a sponsor, it's really more about connection. So think more about connection rather than the lure of the titles.
Right. And Malisha?
You know, I would agree. You could find in different places. They don't have to be within your organization or have a title, but someone is willing to you and share their experiences. You know, my best mentors that I've had was when I first started at Memorial Hermann as an ER director, and she was probably 40 years older than me. And she said, Malisha, you know, you'll never go wrong if you do what's right for the patient, always. And I mean, she took me under her arms as an ER director, clinical background, and I would have never have thought we would have matched up, but she was a great mentor, and she left a legacy within the organization when she retired. You know, I've also had someone share with me individuals that have retired, that have been in healthcare organizations or different fields, are great mentors. These folks have invested in themselves and other leaders throughout their career. And so there's a healthcare executive that I know and I reach out to and I get advice from. And so you find mentors in different places. You know, you don't have to formally ask to be a mentor. Sometimes someone just becomes one naturally with you just building that relationship. But I think you have to find not just one, but 2 or 3, whether it's formal or informal, someone that you look up to. And, you know, there's another way that you grow as well, and that's through observation. When you observe other leaders, that's why I've learned a lot of, you know, what I'm going to do as a leader and what I'm not going to do as a leader by just observing. So there's different way to grow as you become and grow into the leader that you're going to be.
I really like that. And I see many people have been submitting a lot of questions. So why don't we get started? Bonnie, I think you mentioned Carolyn Caldwell earlier, but she had a question. Being young female executives, have you had challenges getting physicians take you seriously?
Physicians?
Physicians.
That's a excellent question, and I feel like it's a little unfair that I'm answering it because Carolyn and I work so close together, and so she knows what it's like here at our hospital. But I think that you know, physicians will tend to take you serious if you can keep the communication lines open. That's one thing that I've noticed, that sometimes they do want immediate results, and sometimes they don't understand that it does take some time to get those results. Actually, we were just in a meeting, Carolyn and I were just in a meeting right before this call, with a physician that just started, and he's eager, and he's Korean, and we recruited him from Texas, not your hospital, Malisha, but but he, you know, he's very eager, but he wants immediate results, and you know, sometimes it's hard to explain. So we have to really sit sometimes physicians down and tell them, look, we're on the same page with you, but you know, we're not going to be able to get you those immediate results right away. Just be patient, work with us on this. But I think, you know, physicians will take you serious once you know, keep those communication lines open.
Right. And I think as aspiring healthcare administrators, we do need to bridge the communication gap between administrators and physicians. And that's still something that we are working on. But then the next question is, what are some of the toughest decisions that you made as a woman leader, and how did it impact your life? What are your thoughts, Coleen?
Ooh, that's a loaded one. Some of the toughest. Okay. You know, like Bonnie mentioned, earlier in our careers, we moved around a lot. And so I think that is a big decision, you know, to move away from family or to change of lifestyle to grow career. I did not talk about having children because I do not have children. And that's something that I did forego in the pursuit of career. And so I'll say that out loud. And I say that when I come visit MHA classes all the time, is that I probably overdid it in terms of working hard, thinking that I was going to earn something back if I gave 15 hours of my day every day and even the weekends. And that the climb, you know, was necessary, and I had to prove something, and I had to work really, really hard. So those were some tough decisions that if I rewound time, I tell the students to take their life more into a balanced perspective. So I think that's one big miss from a female perspective. Some other tough decisions I've had to make at work, I was actually, I wouldn't say assigned. I was given the honor to come to a community that was more rural in nature, that needed a lot of change. It was a turnaround. They did not take females. Forget women of color. They didn't take females seriously. They called you pretty young thing down there, and some other words. And it was hard to be taken serious. So there was a lot of tough decisions in that market, you know, what to open, what to close, how to turn things around, physician relationships, new contracting. And so you have to be bold, you have to be brave. Yeah, so I hope that helps. And I hope that answered that question. There's so many tough decisions every day. And if you're not cut out for a tough decision, health administration is going to be hard.
No, that definitely did answer that. For the next one, can you tell us about a memorable employee or team member? What did they do that makes them stand out in your mind? Malisha, can you take this?
I would say over the past 16 years, there's been so many memorable employees, physician partners that I've worked with. I guess one that I could think of right now is, because she's on my mind, is our chaplain at one of our hospitals. And, you know, the chaplains have an important role, and especially during this time, during COVID, when so many loved ones don't have visitors. But one day I said, you know, Cindy, I said, I think our employees would love to hear from you. You know, just maybe a moment of reflection or a few words of encouragement. And, you know, she has gone above and beyond. She does like a weekly journaling now. And I'll have physicians tell me that they, you know, read the chaplain's letter, and I feel like her letters are more popular than mine. But she just really took it and it just engaged in it, is so passionate about it. And, you know, she's just someone that's just made an impact on me personally with everything that she does. It's with passion. And that's what a lot of our healthcare workers do, whether you're a nurse or you work in our food and nutrition department. I think everyone has a role and what impact our hospital. And she really makes an impact inside our hospital and outside our hospital, and specifically right now during this time.
Right, and it's important to remember that there's no role too big or too small too whenever we're trying to move through our career in healthcare administration. And I see actually 2 questions about executive presence, so I think that we should elaborate more on this, Pam and Brandon. So do you have any suggestions for practicing executive presence, getting your voice heard, and how were you able to forge connections with more senior colleagues? Let's see, Bonnie?
Sure. And I noticed another one of the questions that popped up too was about one of our, favorite or useful books. And so I'm going to answer 2 questions with one answer.
Perfect.
I really highly recommend this book called, I know the name of it sounds pretty awful, but it's called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office.
Yes.
And actually, Myrna is on the call, and so Myrna is one of the girls that I'm mentoring right now, and one of the females I'm mentoring, and she is just really on it. We just had a lunch last week, and man, she showed me her results, and she was like, "This is what happened," with the book. Basically, it's not a typical book that you read from front to back. You take this assessment in the beginning, and then it'll tell you which chapters you need to focus on. And it's written by an executive coach, and their chapters are called maybe How You Sound, or How You Look, or How You Play the Game. And that was a real game changer for me when I read that book, because early in my career, there's another girl that I mentor, and her name's Whitney, and she, when I first met her, she would say "like" a lot. And I just had to tell her, "You sound like a Valley girl. You got to cut the word 'like' out." And she would end all her sentences like this. And that's what that book pointed out to you, is that you have to end your sentences firmly and strongly downward tone, not upward tone like a question. Because people won't take you serious in a meeting if you're constantly sounding like you're asking questions. You have to sound like you are making a statement. And so it's just little tiny things that as females we tend to do without even realizing it. And so I think that's something that I would recommend. If you can get that book and take that assessment, you're going to realize it's going to help you a lot.
Noted. So Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. I hope everyone got that down. Coleen, you mentioned this as well, and Heather and Christina had a question about resiliency. How do you develop resiliency in your teams and those who you are helping to grow and develop? What do you think, Coleen?
And specifically in teams?
Yes, you could talk about in teams or just at Sentara Obici as well. Just developing resiliency.
Resiliency, super multifaceted, and it comes through experience, so that you keep demonstrating that you are resilient or not. It's not a theory, right? So it actually takes experience and practice. You literally have to put yourselves in situations where you would test your resiliency. And so that's why we kept talking to you guys about being uncomfortable, because otherwise, how would you know you're resilient? And your willingness to fail. So with teams, something that people really like about me and some things that people don't like about me is that I give lots of constructive feedback, because I want everyone to be at their best, and so I want everyone to feel their best, be at their best self. But sometimes if you're not used to that, it's a shocker. And so sometimes that tests people's resiliency, especially they probably don't think it'll come out of my mouth when you first meet me, because I might look nice and I might look meek, right, at first, like they had stated before. But when you get feedback also, and ask for feedback, I think as these 2 ladies have stated, and it's negative feedback, how do you absorb that? That's a really good test of resilience. So does that crash your whole world down? Do you pine over that for hours, for a weekend, for the whole week, for the whole month? and you can't get over it, then you're probably not doing well at resiliency. So it's, again, practice, and then telling yourself, how do you keep pushing forward? So forward momentum is how you prove resiliency.
Right. And, on the subject of forward momentum, Malisha, do you believe that you have to continuously put forth more effort and work harder in order to maintain the respect you've acquired, even in your position right now?
Because in our roles, we continue to meet new folks every day, whether it's new physicians or new partners or new vendors or new members of the community. And, we, don't define what a leader looks like. Maybe we do now, but over the years, when people think of the word leader, I don't know if we're thinking of a young female Asian lady, right? And so we have to consistently try hard. And I think, that's it's a part of our work. It's a part of who we are. And I've become accustomed to it. I'll give you an example. When someone mentioned physicians, I do think we have to build the relationships with our physicians, and communication and delivery is really important. But it may take us longer to build that relationship and that trust with our physician partners. I probably 2 years ago had worked with one of our surgeons, and it probably took me a good year to build this relationship where he could communicate with me or escalate something to me. And my COO at the time that was new came in, and I think they just had a conversation at the parking garage talking about fishing. And that relationship was instantly built. And so, where text messages, where he would feel comfortable texting me, just took longer because I had to build that relationship. And so I do think it's something that we have to continue to do. I think we've come a long way, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Yep, and definitely agree on that note. And since we're getting close to the time, but we started a little bit late, is it okay if we, get through a few more questions and then we'll do closing remarks?
Sure.
Awesome. So, Bonnie, why don't you take this question then? What is something you wish you had known earlier in your career journey that maybe you had to learn the hard way or through failure?
That's a very, very good question. And, I'll be transparent with you and share with you that I think the biggest lesson I learned was the importance of loyalty to your senior team. When you're on your senior team, you can say what you want behind closed doors, but you have to have a unified message when you are outside of the senior team doors. And I cannot tell you how important that is. There was a time in my career where, early on in my career, where I had a different opinion than the CEO. And I was an associate administrator, I wasn't a COO yet. And, I was pretty vocal about my difference of opinion. And I took for granted that I was part of the senior team at the time. And I had, I'll just share with you, like EVS, it was contracted out. And then the contracted company leadership came in and said, we'd like to make a change in the leadership. But I thought he was a really, really good EVS director. EVS is environmental services or housekeeping. And so basically, I asked the other directors, I said, hey guys, what do you think? Let's try to keep him on. And that was after the CEO had already said, we're going to make a change in leadership in EVS. And it really, really caused a lot of distrust. That was a really tough lesson to learn. And so, too, I think systemness thinking is important. And earlier in my career, I didn't understand what that meant. And sometimes, like, for example, at one of my former hospitals in Alameda, I was so excited about promoting my hospital that sometimes I would lose sight of what was in the best interest of the system. And so I think that's really important, especially for a lot of our hospitals now that they're part of systems. You know, we need to always keep that in mind. And then I think the last thing is I assumed becoming a mother that maybe this field isn't for me. And so I did step away from the hospital for a little while. And I, for the first time in my career, felt lost, unfulfilled, and I did not like where I was. And I really genuinely missed stepping through the hospital doors every single day. And, you know, when that's all you've ever known and where your passion is, it's really evident, and you don't realize what you have until it's not there. And so no matter how fulfilling it is to be a mom, at the same time, you don't have to give up your career just to be a parent. And I really want to tell you guys that. And I'm so sorry, Coleen, I know I'm speaking to your heart right now because, you know, we've talked on a personal level about our personal lives. But, you know, I think it's really important for those women out there in the field to hear that.
Right. And on the subject of family, Malisha, I know that you do have to go in a little bit, right? You have family pictures. She's on vacation right now, so we don't blame you whatsoever. So feel free to pop out whenever. But thank you so much, Malisha. And we'll keep going for a little bit, Bonnie and Coleen, if that's okay.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again, Bonnie, Coleen. It was an honor to be on this panel with you. And then for the rest of the team, thank you so much for coordinating. And I do encourage folks to link in with me. I look forward to connecting with future healthcare leaders or leaders today. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Malisha. So we still have over 100 people on the line, and I think we can do 2 more questions, one for you, Coleen, and one for you, Bonnie. So Coleen, how do you overcome imposter syndrome as those feelings arise?
So the first thing you have to do is get to know yourself. And when you have a good grounding of yourself, then you'll know when it's starting to feel fake or an imposter. I think in the beginning, I got really lost in just wanting to make it and assimilate, and I was so goal-oriented that you get lost in that. And if I just had taken a breath, then I would probably know myself a little bit more and how to react differently to things. So I think that's probably the core of it, is first taking a pause and just saying, you know, what feels right to me? What do I believe in? What are my values as a leader? And then as you start looking for positions, if you're early in your career, if you're coming out of school, then you'll know what feels right to you. A match will be more evident.
Right. And I think that's something that a lot of people still struggle with. And I'm glad that we mentioned imposter syndrome earlier. But Bonnie, what do you feel was your biggest accomplishment in your role?
Wow, that's a loaded question too. Biggest accomplishment. You know, there's so many things that as a team we achieve together. And I'll tell you, I don't think there's a single accomplishment that I did in my career that was me alone. It's always about looking to see what resources do you have on your team as experts to help bounce ideas off of, or to even vent with about situations. I don't know if I could pinpoint one specific accomplishment. I just think that there's so many things in every hospital that we all work towards. I mean, we all have similar goals. We all have the same quality goals that we strive for. But I think at the end of the day, it's really what can be achieved as a team together. That's what I've learned over the years. I don't know if that really answered the question.
I'm going to call Bonnie out because Bonnie has made tremendous impact in the industry, and she's a self-starter. I think the mentoring that you do, the relationship you have with the ACHE, just so many things. So, you know, huge projects of various, subject matter. So Bonnie's being humble.
Well, Coleen, what do you think about that question then?
Oh, now you're asking.
Yeah. You can brag about yourself a little.
My biggest accomplishment when I look back at the things I've done, it's more enjoyable now, honestly, at the level that we're working at as an executive, not because you're enjoying this title by any means, but it's more so you influence people differently. I think when you're starting out, you're personally doing all the physical work yourself. And I think that's probably also an answer to one of the other questions is why people tend to shy away from health administration, because there's lots of grunt work. It's not glamorous. But then when you get to this level, you get to influence so many people. And if you use that opportunity to do it positively, I think Malisha talked about earlier, watching other people, that's how you develop your own leadership style. There's a lot of people I watch and I said, I ain't doing that. Not doing that, because they did not feel good, and I don't want to make people feel that way. And then also people that you're like, gosh, that made me feel good. I'm motivated by someone like that. I want to mimic that. And so now practicing that on other people and getting people motivated, reaching goals and sustaining them. So I think that's an accomplishment itself, is just having that connection with folks and seeing them at their best. And then one major thing that I just thought was almost impossible at that time was really turning around a hospital that had been, leaking money, poorer quality. So I think that work in itself was really rigorous and difficult and hard, but it had to be through other people, because by the time you get into these roles, you're not, again, physically doing the work yourself. So just like Bonnie said, it takes a team, but Bonnie is being shy.
Well, I guess, what Coleen was saying, we've all accomplished, turnarounds. That's one thing that, when you look back on your career, every hospital has its own story. And you look back and you're like, wow, I saved that hospital from being shut down financially, or from a regulatory standpoint. It was going down the wrong track, or a hospital might have been stuck in their times and kind of the mentality of status quo, we've always done it this way, and not getting better in quality, and making those changes, bringing those positions in, constantly being just once you finish one thing, you're on to the next. It's never just, oh, I've finished. It's constantly, there's something else. It's always something else that you have to work on. And that's, I think, what makes this job fun, is because we get to be problem solvers all day long. But at the same time, we get to empower other people to be problem solvers at the same time. It's kind of like being a parent. You don't want to solve all the problems for your kid. You want them to learn how to do things on their own too. And so you're in this mix of where you get to develop people and see them grow. And then at the same time, you get to learn and grow as well with them.
Mm-hmm. We learn a lot from other people as well. So it's you're always learning something. And I'd say at the essence, at the end of the day, when you turn things around, when you help people get to their best, the impact that you see on the community. Bonnie also was in a turnaround situation, like she mentioned. When you see healthcare delivered at a high quality and it's sustained, super rewarding.
That definitely does sound rewarding. And while we wrap it up, we'll do one question and then a very end key takeaway. Callie is wondering, what keeps you up at night? And while we're in the climate of COVID, I think that's pretty interesting to know what keeps you, both of you, up at night. And then if you can just give us a few key takeaways to end this webinar. What do you think, Bonnie?
Wow. I think, when we look at the care that's given to our patients, I know that sounds very cliche, but if you really, really think about how the patients that are going home after they're being discharged from our hospital, or the patients that are being readmitted, or the ones that are getting maybe the wrong thing done to them because of an error that we did on our part, what are we doing as healthcare leaders to make sure that those errors go down? I think that is the kind of things that keep us up at night. where we are thinking about a certain instances or a conversation or something that might have gotten missed. You know, nobody's perfect. There's human error. And that's the risk that we deal with every single day, that people's lives are in our hands. And, you know, that is really what it all comes down to. Yes, there's titles and everything, but really at the end of the day, we're saving people's lives. And we have to create the best environment possible for people to be able to do that successfully.
And Coleen?
That was perfect answer, Bonnie.
That was.
That's awesome. That's exactly, I mean, that's exactly it. We hold, if you want to enter into an operational perspective, own a P&L, right? It's up to you to create that climate and building that safety culture and the sheer responsibility of making sure something runs at its optimal best. I mean, she said it perfectly. And literally, I didn't sleep for 6 months at this one job because I was worried we were going to hurt somebody. And you don't want somebody in your organization that's coming to you because they trust you with their care to have an adverse event because it's something that you controlled. That really did keep me up at night. And so that continues to kind of that lingering thought. And then COVID, you guys mentioned that it's big, it's real, it's popping up, it's hitting a spike. And I think it's not the biggest spike we've ever seen yet. The sheer notion of literally not having enough staff to do that is very worrisome. It's troubling walking around the floors and seeing those nurse faces. It's heartbreaking. When they say, why didn't you bring agency nurses? Because we're at the biggest census we've ever seen. And you're like, there aren't any. They're in Florida and Houston. You know, those things keep us up at night.
Right. And being from Houston right now, yes, it is very scary just even thinking about that patient safety and quality that both of you are continuously working on right now. But I'm going to hand it off to Andrew for closing remarks soon. But it's been such an honor moderating this panel. And thank you so much to you, Coleen, and Bonnie, and Malisha recently just got off the call. But I just want to say thank you so much. And Andrew, why don't you take us off?
Sure. Well, what a spectacular job, Jennifer, and what an amazing conversation. We wanted to thank you and Coleen, Bonnie, and Malisha for taking the time to be with us tonight. We sincerely appreciated your honesty, your vulnerability, and transparency. All of us in healthcare aspire to make a difference in the world, and today we just wanted to let you know that you left your mark on ours. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. For all of our members, this is a grassroots coalition comprised of people across the nation. So we aren't anything without you. So we encourage you to continue being active on our LinkedIn group, looking into AHLF, and we look forward to partnering with ACHE for future events. So thank you. We wish you all stay safe, healthy, and strong during this time.